We will continue the last segment. Father, we are here before you again. Enlighten us in order that we will be able to understand what we are trying to reflect. I will continue on the dark night that we called it the passive night. Passive because the person is now under the loving hands of God. It is all God's work now. The person has just to remain passive. There are signs that we are undergoing this, what John of the Cross calls the passive night. Maybe in modern language, we call this limit situations. It means that you are before a blank wall. You cannot go forward, nor can you go backward. There are signs that you are undergoing this. First sign is the person can no longer pray discursively by using his mind, his memory, and his imagination. You can no longer meditate. You have no more sensible feelings in prayer. No more consolations. There is only dryness in your prayer. At the same time, you don't enjoy the amusements in the world because it's very normal that when you become very worldly, you will also experience dryness in prayer. But here, you do not enjoy worldly amusements, but you are very dry in prayer. You cannot fix your mind, your memory, and your imagination in any particular object during prayer. Now, slowly and painfully, you have to accept your limitation, facing it without blaming other people. There are 3 conditions in the dark night. First, that the sufferings that you are undergoing is caused by some people or by some event, by some occasions. Now, you have to believe that these are only instruments of God. It is actually God who is sending this to you in order to purify you. But if you start blaming that it's your mother, it is your sister, it is your husband, you cannot get out of the dark night. Because that's one condition that you have to believe, because it is really God's instruments. You have to believe that they are only God's instrument. Actually, it is really God who is purifying you. Third, you cannot get out of this except through prayer. There is no other way. Now, I remember that many of us go through what we call crisis situation and limit situation. People who can afford will go to the doctor, will go to psychologists, like sisters and priests and all of that. But I remember that many of the poor women in the barrio, they get out of their problems by just staying before the Blessed Sacrament. In silence, just praying before the Blessed Sacrament. Situation may not change, but you are beyond the situation. That is what it means. Not that the problem is gone, it is still there, but you are no longer burdened by the problem. You have become interiorly free. Now, slowly you have to accept painfully of your limitation by facing it without blaming others. Why? Because growth begins when blaming ends. There is something that I would really like to emphasize here. No one can imprison you except yourself. That is a decision. Now, there is another sign. You love just to sit in silence before God, and you want to be alone. The person is worried, anxious, and afraid that they are offending God, because of their inability to pray the way they used to pray before. Now, during this time, your suffering is your prayer. In some mysterious way, God is slowly taking away your securities that you used to rely upon. Security with yourself. Security with others. Security with your work. Security with your material possession. And then security in your prayer. Because now, God seems so far away. And you have no spiritual consolation. However, you still hope by being attentive to God. John of the Cross said that if God leads you into this night, it means He is granting you a great favor because He wants you to be transformed and to be liberated so that your only attachment will be the will of God. He said that there are 3 nights that all of us have to undergo. The first part is the early evening. It's not yet very, very dark. The second part, he said, it's midnight. Things cannot anymore be deciphered. It's obscure. The person reaches rock bottom. They are up against a blank wall where they have nowhere to go. And he said, it is good if you reach here. Why? Because there is no other way but to go up. Now, we do not enjoy the freedom of the children of God. We go in and out of our problems. Why? Because we do not pray and we do not really ask God's help. Because at this point in our life, only God and God alone can help us. The third part is the early dawn, just before the break of the day. The person starts to accept the darkness. They become familiar with it because they can see the meaning of their suffering. Now, this happens usually, for example, there is a person who is suffering very, very much because the child is really doing something that they do not like. Maybe they are a very good religious family and then the child eloped with a married man. And you know that is a real dark night. So you went through all of that. God is trying to purify you. And then one day, after so much suffering, you will just see the light within you that God allows this because I am too attached to my children so that I will become free. Then after that, what will happen? You will be able to be freed. You will no longer try to do your own will, but you will only follow the will of God. And for all you know, your children will be converted and they will go back to go to God because you are already purified from your attachments. There are many, many things that happens in our life that we really want to have it. And then we cannot have it, and then we continue to live there, and we are very, very sad about it, but we cannot do anything. We continue to pray, and suddenly we are just out of it. We realize that this is not so important in my life. I know of a woman who is a very, very poor woman, and she is very, very anxious every time at the end of the year, at the end of the month, because she has to provide for the children. And she said, I am a woman who sells vegetables. And so very early in the morning, I tried to sell already vegetables in order that I can have I can have money enough for my kids. But one day, when I went to the market, there was no one who sell the vegetables. And so I was very happy so that I can really control the price. Then after a while, there were many other who are selling. They were asking me, if can you give me please a little so that we can also sell. And then she said, I was hesitating. But then I realized that they also need money. They also need to live. And so I share with them the vegetables so that they can also sell. And then she said, at night, I went back to my house. I tried to look at the money that I have. It is only very small. But I don't know why. Since that night, I am no longer worried about money. You say, God just wait with His sacrifice of sharing with others, even in her poverty. And God released her from her worries about money. And since then, she said, I'm no longer worried about money. So when you are no longer worried, you can hear God guiding you all the time. You see, we cannot hear because we are too anxious of where shall we get all of this and all of that. But after that, when you are already at peace, everything will fall in place because God is talking to you wherever and whatever you want, you will find it. Now, how does the dark night comes into our life? It is always through human instrument. That is why it is so difficult to see the loving hand of God. Our first reaction is to blame. You are the cause here of my suffering. What are God's instruments in the dark night? Break up of meaningful relationship. Again, I would like to tell you that if you buy my book on the Gospel of Contemplation that the St. Paul Fathers are selling, you will be able to read this, and it is very good. It's a very good help for you. Now, there is breakup of families, accidents and sickness, the death of a loved one, family and financial problems, loss of one's good name, power, influence, prestige, and job, losing of one's reputation. You will be humiliated, bankruptcy, feeling of fear and insecurity and anxiety that one is powerless to overcome. And then there is a very strong enslavement of the 7 capital sins. Now, we are going to close, and I am going to lead a prayer, and we will come back in the next episode. Let us now go to prayer. Father, we thank you for this moment of grace. Enlighten our minds that we will be able to live concretely in our lives what we have been reflecting. When our nights will come, dear Father, be with us, lead us to discover the light in the darkness of the night. Dear Father, we ask you to be with us, and we thank you for all the graces that you have given us. Now, we are going to end this, and we will continue in the next episode. Thank you.